See, you know what? Because I heard the click stop and I thought you stopped.
Let's get this bread. Hey, what's up guys? It's Lucas and you're watching Fine Tuning. It's time for the next installment in my Was It As Good or As Bad As I Remember series. Today we're going to be checking out this beast from the alt-rock years of yore, the mid-2000s. This is the Ibanez SZ520QM. I wish they would come up with different naming conventions. I find those extremely confusing. So this video is going to be in 3 parts. I will leave timestamps in the description as well as here on the screen. Part 1 is going to be story time, which will be where I got this guitar and why I chose to get this guitar. Part 2 will be the tech stuff. This guitar does need a little bit of TLC, so I am going to do that in the video as well. If you want to watch that, you can skip to that timestamp. And then part 3 will be the playing example section where you can hear what the guitar sounds like and also hear my final thoughts. So here we go, part 1. I don't really know how to hold this. I don't know if I should hold it like this, like I'm talking to it, or if I should hold it in the playing position. I don't know. So there's a large local thrift store close to where my wife and I live, and we like to go there and peruse like old books and movies, DVDs, things like that. Also video game stuff, and I actually bought some home stereo speakers from there before, and all kinds of random bits and pieces like that. They also have a music section that I go by sometimes that has guitars and basses and amplifiers, microphones, pedals, all kinds of random stuff. It's kind of like going to a pawn shop in that sense, and when I say that, I mean that the stuff that they have is usually kind of inexpensive, entry-level type stuff, and it may also not be in the best condition, and it tends to be maybe a little overpriced, so I kind of steer clear of it. I don't often buy stuff from the music section in this store. It's just not what I'm there for. However, this time when I walked past the music section, this was hanging on the wall, and it caught my eye. So I leaned in a little closer to see what it looked like, and I saw this price tag for $232.95. And I thought, that seems pretty reasonable for what this is, because I had a pretty good idea what this is. But then also there was that big nostalgia bug thing for me, which I'm going to get into in just a second. And I thought, as long as it's in like half decent shape, I'll probably buy that, and I'll make a video about it. So I asked the gentleman behind the counter if I could check it out. Of course, he handed it to me. And I did just kind of the best inspection that I could in this particular store, because it's not like a music store where they just have amps plugged up and you could just go plug it up and try it. So I kind of just visually checked it out to make sure there wasn't anything huge, glaring, obvious, like a neck break or something, or frets coming out of the guitar. Of course, I couldn't check the electronics, but it looked like it was in pretty decent shape, just maybe hadn't been taken care of, maybe had been in somebody's closet for a long time or something. So it was at this point that I decided that I was going to take a chance on this guitar, because it has a cool nostalgic memory for me, and I'm pretty confident in my lutherie skills overall, and as long as this, truss rod is fine and everything kind of is within reason, I can fix it without too much trouble. So why this guitar? Why the 2003 Ibanez SZ520QM? Story time. Just a reminder, if you don't want to hear any of this stuff and you just want to hear what the guitar sounds like, you can go to the description, click the timestamp, and jump right to that. Flashback to the year of our Lord 2004, which was 20 years ago. I was 15 years old. I'd been playing for about a year, or maybe almost a year and a half at that time. And I was still using I had a Behringer Strat copy, like a Behringer knockoff Strat. That was my first guitar that my dad had bought me. It was very inexpensive, and it didn't stay in tune very well. It didn't sound good. It was hard to play, as entry-level guitars often were back then. And it was kind of just time for me to get a guitar, like a real guitar, because I think it became apparent to me and my dad both that I was taking this very seriously, and it was something that I was going to pursue, and so it was time for me to have like a real guitar. So this was a little before my birthday, and Dad would take me to some music stores around so that I could try out some different guitars and kind of see what I liked and what I didn't like, and then I would have to sort of decide what was in the price range that was acceptable at the time. Which was, around $300 or $400, I think, at the time, which was a lot of money to me as a teenager. So one of the music stores that I like to go to a lot was called Duncan Music. And the reason I like to go there is because they had Gibson guitars and Marshall amplifiers. And I was really into classic rock, and pretty much everybody in classic rock played either Fenders or Gibsons and Marshalls. That was just how it was back then. So that was the stuff I was really into, and I wanted to go there. Of course, Gibsons were out of my price range at this point. Even the cheapest Gibsons were still $600, $700, $800. That was too expensive for me. But they had Marshalls, and I could play guitars through Marshalls, and I thought that sounded great. The old dual super leads and triple super leads and stuff, they were pretty cool for me at the time as a 15-year-old. But they also carried Ibanez guitars. So at the time, most of my guitar advice and guitar knowledge came from my dad. And my dad was a 70s and 80s era guitar player, and he had a fair bit of experience with the old Japanese Ibanezes that were imported. So things like the Artists and the Musician, the kind of set neck, almost sort of pseudo Gibson type stuff that was happening before they moved into the bolt-on shredder stuff that they later became so known for. In fact, those guitars were made in the same factory, just fun fact, as my beloved Grecos. This is my 1977 EG800 that I call Misa. But those guitars were made in the same factory. Those were just not available here in the US. They were domestic guitars. So my dad really liked those old Ibanez guitars. They were super high quality, and at the time they were considerably less expensive than the Gibson and Fender counterparts that were made here in the United States. So he saw these on the wall in several different colors with these kind of quilty tops on them. And he pointed those out to me and said, those are really good guitars. You should go check those out. So by this time, the sales guy comes from across the room because he sees us over there talking about the guitar. And he says, hey, would you like to try that one out? And I said, yeah, can I plug it into a Marshall? And of course, the sales guy's thinking, like, I need to make this commission. He's like, yeah, you should go plug into this 100-watt triple super lead into a 412 cabinet. So we go over to the amp section. He hands me a cable and plugs me into this big Marshall. Says, just be careful with the volume. It's super loud. It was. And I sit down with the guitar, and I turn the volume control up, and I just hit, like, I think like a big A chord, you know, like that. And I remember just being like, I mean, it wasn't loud, but it was just so powerful because remember, I'm 15 years old and I only have this kind of knockoff Strat thing and a little tiny Behringer amplifier with an 8-inch speaker. It did have distortion built into it, but it just didn't have 100-watt Marshall through a 412 distortion. And it didn't have high output humbuckers. And when I hit that big chord, it was just like I could feel it rattling my chest. And I just remember being taken aback by it, like, whoa. And my dad was over there grinning, like, yeah, it's pretty good, right? And I remember thinking, man, the guitar, like, it played so easy, especially in comparison to that cheap guitar that I had. And the other thing I really specifically remembering it is that it stayed in tune so well. I mean, I could just play open chords and cool chord shapes just anywhere on the neck, and that everything sounded in tune. It was beautifully intonated, and it would not fall out of tune, which was not the case with my very inexpensive guitar. And I was really impressed by the guitar. Unfortunately, it was not so cool that I could see past my 15-year-old know-it-all self and still thought, like, well, it doesn't say Gibson on the headstock, so that's not what I want. Which is ironic because the Gibson that I later went on to get was like a huge pain in my butt, and I had to do a ton of work too to get it to do what I wanted it to do. So sometimes I would sit back when I would see one of these somewhere and think, man, I wonder if my guitar trajectory would have been different if I'd have just went ahead and got this guitar because it played great and sounded great and stayed in tune. And like there was no reason for me not to get it other than it didn't say Gibson on the headstock. So then flash forward to me in the thrift store and I see this guitar hanging on the wall. I have this flashback of all these memories. And I never had owned one of these. I had just played them in the store, and then they kind of discontinued them, I think, after maybe 2007 or something. It was a pretty short run. So I saw it up there, and I thought, if that guitar is in like half decent shape, I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to answer that question once and for all. Would I have really liked this guitar? Was it as good as I remember? So let's talk a little bit about this model of guitar. As I said, this is an Ibanez SZ520QM, and the QM stands for quilt maple or quilted maple. It's a little hard to tell on this one because the top is so dark in the light, but there is a quilted maple veneer on top of this guitar. Some of the other colors, the quilt pops a little more. But it's an all mahogany guitar, so it's got a kind of a thick mahogany back and a kind of a thinner profile mahogany neck. Not as thin as a Wizard, but pretty thin, like I would say it's a thin C shape. It has a really cool sculpted kind of set-in neck heel that you can really just get way up here with, which is super cool. It has two high output humbuckers. I measured them with a meter, and this one was like 15.8, and I think this one was maybe 9.5 or something. Pretty high output. It has a master tone and then a volume control for the bridge and a volume control for the neck. And a unique thing about this one that I didn't remember, but is apparently a stock feature, is it has a really cool three-way toggle where when you're in the down position, you're in the bridge, and when you're in the up position, you're in the neck. But when you're in the middle position, it auto splits, so that you have a split sound in the middle, kind of like the old Petrucci guitars, or the new Petrucci guitars for that matter. And I just didn't remember that. I probably wouldn't have known, but I didn't remember that, and I thought, man, that's super cool, so I'm definitely going to leave that in there. This is an interesting thing, because you guys, if you watch the channel, you know that I'm a PRS guy, and I have been for many years. And I didn't know this at the time, but this is a 25.1-inch scale length, which is unusual for Ibanez. Ibanez either usually has a 25.5-inch, like on their super Strat kind of stuff, or a 24.75-inch, like if they're kind of more Artcore, Gibson-y kind of things. So a 25.1 is an interesting scale because it's 0.1 away from being the 25-inch PRS scale length. And obviously, this is kind of similar to a PRS-style body. And the whole, the mahogany and the maple and the double cutaway and this particular shape and the shape of the headstock At the time, it didn't occur to me, but this is kind of like an Ibanez shot at PRS. Because even the later models of this, if I'm pretty sure, I think they went and added extra inlays that almost kind of start to look like birds. So that's just ironic, because at the time I wasn't really a PRS guy, but I ended up becoming one. So now that I've kind of circled back to this, it's like, oh, that's fitting. So as I said, we've got kind of a similar to PRS shaped headstock here, 3 on the side. And it's got a tilt back to it, kind of, I would say it looks to me like about like 14 or 15 degrees. It's not quite the full Gibson, kind of somewhere in the PRS ballpark. And it has what looks to me like a plastic nut, but it held tune really well. And they're non-locking tuners, kind of Schaller style tuners. It has a volute on the neck right there, which I think is a good idea, and this one doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't get in the way. It's hardly noticeable. As you can see, it's got a big, thick, chunky bridge here, which adds a lot of mass, and I think it tends to add a lot of tone to a guitar. And then it's got a string-through body with this really cool kind of stair-stepped thing, which I think is super neat. You can see on the back here, we've got the string-through ferrules. Nice big cavity there, which I really like. So before we can really try out the guitar and give it a fair shake, it does need some TLC. I knew that going into it, but I'm comfortable with all this work, so it's no big deal. So this guitar, it looks to me like probably someone played pretty hard and then maybe put it in a case for a long time. It's got some kind of tarnishing on the hardware and stuff like that, normal play wear, but then also the fingerboard is very, very dirty. It's got all kinds of gunk on it. I couldn't really check the levelness of the frets because the action was set pretty high. So in the store, I could only check it so much because the action was so high that it's not an accurate measurement. So when I got home and I kind of just straightened the neck out and lowered the bridge a little bit, I could tell that there are some buzzy spots. But it looks like it's in pretty good shape. There's a couple of spots on the frets where there's some little tiny dings in them where it almost looks like the guitar fell over and maybe the string dug into the fret or something a little bit. Not terrible, but a little bit. And it's just really dirty. Actually, the electronics all work totally fine, which was cool. So I think what this guitar really needs is just a good, deep clean, very light fret level and dress. I mean, it's not much at all. And then, a good setup. I did notice that one of the ferrules here in the back is missing. I have a big bag full of those in different colors, so I'm going to replace at least that, if not maybe all of the ferrules with new ones, and then just kind of do a light level and dress, clean it up, set it up, and then we'll check it out. You know what this color looks like? It looks like the little girl in the Willy Wonka factory who gets blown up into a giant blueberry. Like, that's what color this reminds me of. I looked it up. Her name was Violet, so I'm going to call this guitar Violet because she looks like the girl in Willy Wonka who gets blown up into a giant blueberry. In hindsight, that is a really creepy movie. Let's take this to the bench.
This earth, I pray to live and fight another day, or die proving my worth. Ancestors, fill me with your strength, imbue me with your might. Guide my hand upon your chosen blade till the morning light. Warrior in my fire blood, I'm born. fragment of a figure of life left behind. The apparition calls out to me with familiar words, a relic patina of a shape, but the image blurs.
So here we are back at the desk with the Ibanez SZ520QM. Again, Ibanez, you just got to work on the naming conventions. So as you can see, I have fully refurbished the guitar, so it's nice and clean again, and it's playing great, sounding great, staying in tune. Everything is completely stock on the guitar, except for I reversed the orientations of the pot here, so this is now the bridge volume instead of the neck volume, just because I like to be able to grab the bridge volume easier. And I put strap lock buttons on it because I just like to have strap locks on the guitars, but everything else on the guitar is completely stock. It was a pretty straightforward job, actually. The biggest thing was just taking the guitar apart really like all the way down to the bones and cleaning everything deeply because it's just really, really dirty. So let's start checking the guitar out with a nice warm clean tone. This is the clean channel on my amp 1, and I've got a Wampler mini ego compressor on. In fact, that's on all the time, and also some built-in reverb from the amp. And we'll start with the bridge pickup, and that sounds like this. So there's that thing that jumps out to me again that I kind of remember from years ago, which is the guitar is sort of powerful and stiff sounding. It's kind of a thick, dark sound, which is cool. And in this case, I'm using a clean sound that I kind of usually have dialed for more of a bright single coil pickup. So with this really big, powerful, bassy, dark bridge pickup, it's pretty dark and woody sounding. But you can hear that thing I was talking about where the chords they just sound very intonated and resonant, even in shapes that are maybe a little bit more dissonant naturally sounding. It's just a really stiff, powerful sound. It makes me think of like 2000s like alt rock type guitar, which is probably what they were going for. Let's go to the middle position. So this is going to be both pickups on together but split. So this is going to clean it up quite a bit. So this guitar is just a whole vibe for me, man. I'm just finding that even in that middle position where it's split, both the pickups are split, it's just very powerful sounding. It's just really stiff and full and dark sounding. It's a lot more clear, and kind of there's a glassy top end with the split sound, but it's still very, very powerful. And this is the kind of sound that sounds like a lot kind of overwhelming when it's recorded under a microscope like this, but if you did that live, that would sound like a big, full, friendly, clean sound, and it wouldn't sound so just punishingly dark and powerful. So yeah, I totally see what this guitar is going for, and I'm picking up what it's putting down. I'm going to go to the neck pickup, which is, again, we're going to be in full humbucking mode. That sounds like this. Yeah, the more I play this guitar, the more I kind of feel that sort of modern guitar thing, or modern in the 2000s guitar sound. It's really stiff and powerful and dark, kind of that alt rock clean thing, where I'm not going to do it because I would get copyright claimed to death, but if you were to play some finger-picked Creed type lines or something, it would sound pretty authentic, I think. Also, by the way, if I haven't said it already, this guitar plays really, really nice. I just did a really shallow level and dress just to kind of make sure everything was even, and just set the neck pretty straight and the action kind of low, and it just feels really good. It's like a super smooth playing guitar. This is a really high quality, well-built instrument. So now we're going to go to the vintage mode on the Amp 1, and this is kind of like a classic Plexi Marshall type sound. I have mine in the low gain mode, so it's not quite as sizzly, but with these pickups, it's still pretty aggressive sounding. So we're at least in AC/DC, if not a little bit more at this point. So I'll be honest, that's really not what I was expecting from that. That's kind of a low to medium gain vintage Marshall type sound. And I was expecting something a little bit more aggressive, like a super distortion type sound or something, but it actually was really clear and kind of chimey. There's kind of almost a Telecaster quality to that bridge pickup, which is surprising to me. I don't know if it'll behave the same way under more gain, but like on that kind of medium to low gain Marshall type sound, really, really clear. I'm going to put it in the middle position, which will be the single coil, so I'm curious to see what this sounds like now. to say, I don't know what I was expecting in that middle position, but it wasn't that. I mean, that's super cool, but just not what I was expecting at all. I mean, that's really kind of it's like a pseudo telly type thing. Actually, you know what it reminds me of is on the old PRSs with the rotary switch, there's like the 4 position where it's like the inner coils. It's not quite Strat, but it's something similar to that. It kind of reminds me of that. But it's super bright and stinging and percussive, and on that particular sound with that sort of lower level of gain is really cool. Just not what I was expecting out of this guitar. Same thing, but on the neck pickup. I have to say, I'm finding this guitar to be full of surprises because, again, as a neck humbucker, based off the clean sound we just had a second ago, I wasn't expecting it to sound like that when you put it under a Marshall gain type sound. But now that is almost single coil. There's a tubular, almost kind of like big Strat sound to that. I can play those Texas kind of lines and it sounds really cool and thick, like thicker than a single coil, but has some of those real chirpy, bright qualities. That's wild. So I discovered something while I was playing with this, and I'm going to touch on it just a little bit here. Because of the way this is wired, there's a unique thing that you can do. So you can't split the pickups individually because the split happens in the middle position. However, you do have 2 volume controls. So what you can do is put it in the middle position where both pickups are split, and then roll the volume off of one coil or one pickup so that it weights it towards one of the other pickups. Like if I roll the bridge volume off, it weights it more towards the neck. And then what you start to get is more of a split neck pickup sound. It's never completely the neck pickup by itself, because if you roll it all the way off, then you kill the circuit. But it's a unique thing. So you can kind of have like a blend sound that kind of leans a little bit more towards split neck or split bridge or something like that. So I'll demonstrate. So I'll start in the middle position, just fully both pickups split, and then I'll kind of weight it towards one or the other. Now, I don't know if that's a happy accident just because of this particular wiring setup, or if they intended it to be that way, like that was part of the design. But I think that's a really cool feature, to be able to kind of weight it towards one coil or the other and have it be split too. So you have kind of the option of like the split humbucker either way, or both of them together, or the full humbucker. So I guess I'm just saying this is a very versatile guitar in terms of the tone that you can get out of the guitar itself. But now we need to go talk a little bit about a heavier sound, because I kind of think that's what this guitar was sort of marketed towards, was the sort of more alt-rock sound. So I'm going to dial up on my amp 1 here like a more modern, aggressive sound and kind of play that style of guitar, and let's kind of see how it holds up. So yeah, obviously the guitar does that really well. I would have been surprised if it didn't. That would have been weird if this guitar didn't do the heavy thing from that sort of alt-rock mid-2000s era. But yeah, of course it does that really well. And all I did there was just flick from the vintage mode on my amp 1 to the modern mode and kind of turn the gain up from like 5 to 7 or something, just thicken it up a little bit. But it holds up really well under gain. The pinch harmonics just hop right out like you would expect them to. It's tight and clear. Feels good under the palm. Like if you're a really heavy Hetfield kind of muting sort of guy, this bridge is rock solid. It doesn't move or give at all, and it feels really good and smooth under your hands. So I mean, this is a great like metal rhythm riffing guitar. For instance, like if I decide I want to do some really aggressive, tight rhythm riffing stuff when I'm recording in the future, I'm probably gonna pick this up because this tracks really well as far as like the chords and everything. It feels good, and again, that resonant chord ringing thing where I don't know if it's the scale length or the pickups or the wood or whatever the combination is, but when you play those ninth chords and those shapes like that, that can sometimes be a little weird, it resonates really tightly, like all the ringing sounds good. So finally, let's explore what this guitar does in kind of a high gain lead setting. So the way that I set my lead tone usually is a very dark, warm, kind of mid-range present sound, kind of like Andy Timmons or Eric Johnson or something like that. It's a big, warm, friendly sound, and there's a nice big delay in the background. So I kind of just want to hear and feel how the guitar performs under that sound. Interesting. That is the first place I've kind of started to notice some idiosyncrasies about the guitar. It's like when I get into lead mode in my brain and when I use that kind of dark, full sound, that's where I notice something a little weird about the guitar. So first of all, playability, this guitar is great. It's not fighting me at all when I go to do the leads. Anytime I'm like flubbing up or something, that's on me. It's not the guitar. However, part of that is I guess I'm more accustomed to having fingerboard markers than I realize, because when I go to play this, I think like, oh yeah, I can look at the side dots and it'll be fine, but like, no, it kind of messes me up a little bit. So I guess I'm just used to looking at the fingerboard and not the side dots. And my hand was kind of going where it needed to go, but then I would second guess myself for like half a second, and that's enough to distract me a little bit and sort of throw me off. So probably if I just played this guitar a whole lot and just really spent a lot of time with it, I would get used to it and wouldn't think about it anymore. Or if I put some kind of inlay in it myself or some stickers or something, I probably would not notice it anymore. But that's something that was tripping me up a little bit. And the other thing is this, interestingly, when I layer on that warm, thick, high gain lead sound, that's where I notice the ceramic magnet in the pickup. When I am trying to pick lightly or hard or kind of like get a pinch harmonic or whatever, there's that that happens with the ceramic magnet that it really just jumps out and I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound good. Now that's subjective, of course, and it cuts through really nicely, but for me, that is not a sound that I like. Especially on that bridge pickup sound, when I go to pick a note and it kind of doesn't give, it just goes, it's kind of stiff, like, ugh, I don't like that sound. So I think that's got to be the ceramic magnet thing. And this is where the pickups are really powerful. And so when I go to do those sort of like 9 shapes and stuff like that, it kind of gets a little muddy, starts to lose some definition. It's not terrible, probably not that noticeable live, but under a microscope when you're recording it like this, I can kind of hear there's a loss of definition there. That's a really minor thing. And obviously that's something you could fix by changing pickups. But it's just something I noticed. So, like, I think this is a really cool sounding rhythm guitar for multiple levels of gain and stuff. But then when I go to play lead with it, I think, nah, no, I probably wouldn't record that way. So in conclusion, the Ibanez SZ520QM, is it as good as I remember it being? Yeah, it's outstanding actually. This is a really, really good value, particularly for the money back then, but also now. These are discontinued and they have been for quite a few years, so you can find them on eBay and Reverb for like, you know, $300 or something, which is just, this is a lot of guitar for $300. I defy you to find another guitar that feels good and plays good and works as well as this guitar for that kind of money. I mean, that's outstanding. And if you find one that's been taken care of and you don't have to do the work that I did, I mean, just right out of the gate, that's just a terrific guitar. You know, I said my only little tiny quarrels are that, you know, the fingerboard doesn't have the inlays here, but the later models do have more inlays. And then the pickups, which are very easily changeable things. So if you like the pickups, awesome. If not, it's not a huge deal to put a different set of pickups in this guitar. And I think that's all you need to do to it, really, is just kind of if you like a different sound. But this is a great bones piece of guitar. I mean, it feels really good. It's not super heavy. It stays in tune. It looks great. I think this is a very cool kind of classic shape that doesn't seem ostentatious, but it also doesn't look too much like anything else. This is a really unique electronic setup, which is super cool. I mean, there's a lot to like about this guitar and not much to dislike. So yeah, I think it's as good or better than I remember it. And I think if you were considering getting one of these, if you found this video because you're looking up about these, then like, yeah, go ahead and pull the trigger. This is a pretty cool guitar, man. So I want to thank you guys that have stuck around to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave your comments and questions down below. And until next time, I will catch you later.